Sigmund Freud, born in 1856 in Moravia, what is now the Czech Republic, is one of the most influential and controversial thinkers in psychology. Originally trained as a neurologist, Freud's revolutionary shift came when he turned his attention to the human psyche. Through his clinical work with patients, he developed the foundations of psychoanalysis, a method for treating mental illness by uncovering unconscious thoughts. Freud's most enduring contribution was his theory of the mind as a layered structure: the conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious. This would later be visualized as the famous iceberg model. Freud argued that what we are aware of on the surface is only a tiny part of what drives us. Beneath the visible tip lies a vast reservoir of hidden desires, fears, and memories. By exploring this hidden realm, Freud believed we could understand not just mental illness, but human behavior itself. Whether praised or criticized, his work reshaped how we think about the mind. Freud's Iceberg Theory is one of the most iconic models in psychology. Imagine an iceberg floating in the ocean. The part above the waterline represents our conscious mind, the thoughts, feelings, and perceptions we are actively aware of. Just below the surface is the preconscious, which represents memories or knowledge we can bring into awareness when needed. But the vast bulk of the iceberg lies beneath the water, representing the unconscious. This is where Freud believed the real engine of human behavior lies. It contains repressed memories, forbidden desires, instinctual drives, and unresolved conflicts. According to Freud, our behavior, dreams, slips of the tongue, and even symptoms of mental distress often originate here, outside our awareness. The conscious mind is not the driver of the ship, it is the lookout, unaware of what stirs below. The iceberg metaphor gives us a powerful visual. The majority of who we are lies beneath the surface. At the deepest level of the unconscious lies the id. This is the primal core of the mind, the part we are born with. It operates entirely unconsciously and is driven by what Freud called the pleasure principle. The id seeks immediate gratification for our basic drives, like hunger, sex, aggression, and survival. It doesn't understand logic, morality, or consequences. It wants what it wants, and it wants it now. Imagine a newborn baby crying for food or comfort. That's the id in action. It is chaotic, instinctual, and timeless. For Freud, much of the tension in our psyche comes from the id's demands clashing with the constraints of reality. Though we often suppress its impulses, they still influence us, in dreams, fantasies, and emotional outbursts. The id is not evil, but it is primitive. It is the raw energy that fuels the rest of the mind. Opposing the id is the superego, which can be defined as our internalized sense of morality, ethics, and societal rules. It develops during childhood as we absorb the values of our parents and our culture. The superego operates on the morality principle, striving for perfection and judging our actions and even our thoughts. It has two parts: the conscience, which punishes us with guilt for doing wrong, and the ego ideal, which rewards us with pride when we meet our internal standards. The superego is often harsh and rigid. It doesn't care if our desires are natural. It cares whether they are objectively acceptable. This part of the psyche can become overly dominant, leading to self-criticism, shame, and anxiety. Freud believed the superego was just as unconscious as the id in many ways. Many of our moral beliefs operate without our conscious awareness. It is the voice in our head that says, "You should," "You must," or "You are not good enough." Caught between the raw desires of the id and the strict rules of the superego is the ego. This is the part of the psyche that deals with reality. It operates mostly in the conscious and preconscious realms and tries to balance the demands of the id, the superego, and the real world. The ego works according to the reality principle, delaying gratification, making compromises, and finding socially acceptable ways to meet our needs. Think of it as a mediator. The ego listens to the id's cries for pleasure and the superego's moral warnings and tries to find a workable solution. When the ego can't manage this conflict, it may resort to defense mechanisms like denial, repression, or projection to protect us from anxiety. Freud saw the ego as essential to mental health. A strong ego keeps us grounded, realistic, and capable of functioning in the world, even when inner conflict persists. Freud believed that much of our mental energy is spent managing the ongoing conflict between the id, ego, and superego. When these parts of the psyche clash, the ego often deploys defense mechanisms to reduce anxiety and maintain stability. These are unconscious strategies that distort or deny reality to protect the self. For example, repression pushes painful thoughts out of conscious awareness. Denial refuses to accept an unpleasant reality. Projection is when we disown feelings like anger or jealousy by seeing them in others instead, avoiding the discomfort of facing them in ourselves. Rationalization justifies bad behavior with logical excuses. While these mechanisms can be helpful short-term, over-reliance on them can distort our view of reality and prevent emotional growth. Freud believed that uncovering these defenses in therapy could help patients understand themselves more deeply. By becoming aware of what we are hiding from ourselves, we can begin to live more consciously and freely. Freud famously called dreams the royal road to the unconscious. In sleep, the ego's guard relaxes and the id speaks more freely, but not directly. Because the superego still exerts influence, the id's desires appear in disguised form through dream symbols. Freud developed a technique called dream analysis to interpret these symbols. He distinguished between the manifest content, what the dream seems to be about, and the latent content, its hidden, unconscious meaning. For example, dreaming about a locked box might symbolically represent repressed sexuality or emotional secrecy. Freud believed that by exploring dreams, we could uncover hidden conflicts, unresolved trauma, and unacknowledged desires. He saw them as windows into the unconscious, not random nonsense, but meaningful expressions of the parts of ourselves we often ignore. Even today, many therapists draw on dream work to explore emotional depth and symbolic thinking. Freud's ideas have sparked both admiration and intense criticism. Some accuse him of overemphasizing sexuality, using unscientific methods, or projecting his own biases into his theories. Others point out that many of his concepts are difficult to test empirically. And yet Freud's influence is undeniable. He introduced the idea that we are driven by unconscious forces, that childhood shapes adulthood, and that talking through feelings can heal. His work laid the groundwork for psychotherapy, trauma theory, and much of modern personality psychology. The Iceberg Theory in particular has become a widely recognized symbol, used in art, business, education, and beyond. Even if we reject some of his conclusions, we still grapple with the questions he asked. What lies beneath our thoughts? What are we hiding from ourselves? And what happens when we bring it into the light? If Freud's theory helped you see yourself in a new way, or sparked a question about your own inner iceberg, let us know in the comments. How have you recognized the id influence your own behaviors? And if you want to go deeper, like and subscribe for more deep dives into psychology, philosophy, and the inner world. Because here at the Thoughtful Revolution, we don't just consume ideas, we live them.